絞り知事はぜひしてください。波町から来た。
We do not believe that it is treated.
Рассчитываем, что Токио проявит должную степень транспарентности.
我们敦促日方以负责任的态度处理好这一问题。
The results of what they tell me is that each tank is quite different.
Haruo Ono is busy on his boat. He's a fisherman, born and bred in Fukushima. He first went out to sea at the age of 15, and fishing has been his livelihood ever since. The waters off Japan's Pacific east coast are rich in marine life, the source of some 200 varieties of fish and shellfish. In the past, Haruo Ono would go out on his boat on 300 days of the year, but now he's restricted to no more than 120 days. Tsurishihama is a major fishing port in northeastern Japan. 50 kilometers to the south is the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. 12 years ago, on the afternoon of March the 11th, 2011, a magnitude 9 earthquake struck off Japan's northeastern coast. It triggered an enormous tsunami, which inflicted catastrophic damage on Iwate, Miyagi, and Fukushima prefectures.
あの時は本当合図だったよ。うちは壊れっかと思ったし、この後から俺大津波警報って入ったのは弟は遅くで何かエンジントラブルで持ってなくなったんですよ。津波に飲まれて船と弟は。発見できなかったんですよ。3月11日です。
Many people lost their lives in the disaster. Haruo Ono can never forget the pain of that day when he saw his brother for the last time. But worse was to follow. The nearby Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant had suffered catastrophic damage and began leaking radiation. Its 4 nuclear reactors had been devastated, with core meltdowns occurring in 3 of them. In the wake of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, a fishing ban was imposed locally. Haruo Ono lost his livelihood. He and his family were reduced to doing odd jobs to get by. Eventually, in the first half of 2012, limited fishing was permitted on a trial basis off Fukushima. Small quantities of fish could be caught in the coastal waters, and they had to be subjected to strict testing before they could be sold. Meanwhile, at the nuclear power plant, seawater was being pumped into the reactors to cool the damaged cores. This, together with the groundwater and rainwater seeping into the reactor buildings, formed a massive reservoir of contaminated wastewater. Tokyo Electric Power Company, which operates the Fukushima plant, stores the contaminated wastewater in more than 1,000 gigantic tanks, with a combined capacity of 1.37 million tons. Standing beside the ruins of the plant, they are a stark reminder of the nuclear catastrophe. With time, fishing gradually resumed. However, catches today are only 20% of what they were before the Fukushima disaster. But then, to the horror of the local fishermen, on April 13, 2021, the Japanese government took the decision that the contaminated wastewater from the nuclear plant, after filtering and diluting, would be released into the sea. The government's decision to release the contaminated wastewater into the sea provoked an immediate and angry response among the local residents. Crowds gathered outside the local government offices demanding an alternative solution to the issue. The Japanese government's plan also sparked huge concern in the neighboring countries.
福岛核事故污染水处置问题，事关亚太地区和全球生态环境安全，事关各国人民生命健康，理应征求各利益攸关方，特别是日本周边国家的意见。
우선 정부는 일본 정부의 후쿠시마 원전 오염수 해양 방출 결정에 대해 강한 유감을 표하며
On April 15th, 2021, Harry Roque, spokesperson for the President of the Philippines, addressed the issue at a press conference.
First principle is that we are one ecosystem. Second principle is that we are interconnected. And the third principle is that the polluter must pay.
On the same day, a panel of UN human rights experts expressed deep regret at Japan's decision. They said that releasing contaminated wastewater from the damaged Fukushima nuclear plant into the ocean could impact millions of lives and livelihoods in the Pacific region. Despite all the opposition, the Japanese government on January the 13th announced that it would go ahead and start releasing the contaminated wastewater into the sea sometime during the spring or summer 2023, a process that could last up to 30 years. By February 2023, an estimated 1.32 million tons of contaminated wastewater was being stored at the Fukushima nuclear power plant, enough to fill 500 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Moreover, the plant was still contaminating wastewater at a rate of 140 tons every day.
福島県の住民者は福島県の海で取んなくちゃないんだから。我々はどこにも逃げてくことできないんですよ。もしわかんないと言わんだって魚ぐらいにおったら生活なのにもみんな離れるんですよ。生活しがにおったら魚も売れない、買わない。
Fishermen like Haruo Ono aren't alone in being worried by the Japanese government's decision to release contaminated wastewater into the sea. Their concerns extend across the whole of the local fishing industry.
水を流すとなると、それがですね、増えるんじゃなくて逆に下がっちゃう可能性もあるんじゃないかという懸念はあります。要するに風評とか、福島県産に対する安心っていう部分でなかなか担保できないとか、そういうふうに思われる方が大勢いらっしゃいますと、なかなか我々も流通させるのが難しいかなと思ってます。
12 years ago, Ohama Fish Market was destroyed in the tsunami. A new premises has been built on the site.
やっとこういうふうに収束したのに海に流しちゃったんではまだあれだろ現在だってたまに大丈夫かだんだんというお客さんがいいんだから海に流しちゃったんで余計まだ元に戻っちゃう
放射能関係がやっぱりまた多くなってくるんじゃないかと心配がねそういう点でやっぱり一番心配じゃないですかね不安定ですからね
It's not the outflow of the water itself that concerns people, but the radioactive substances in it. So, widespread concern has focused on how the contaminated wastewater is treated and its safety.
今ここに立っているという状況です。で、この増設アルプスは、3系統あります。1つの系統で250トン。
In order to meet the regulatory standards for discharge, Tokyo Electric Power employs an advanced liquid processing system to treat the contaminated wastewater. Although the company claims that the system eliminates most of the radioactive isotopes in the wastewater, it accepts that the radioactive tritium is not removed. Instead, it has promised to reduce the concentration of tritium to 1/40th of that permitted under the government's safety standards. However, Tokyo Electric Power stands accused of falsifying data and concealing safety issues at the Fukushima plant, and this casts serious doubt on the safety of the treated water discharged into the sea.
だからそこは東京電力が間違ったことを言ってるんです。なんていうか、ある程度は取り除くけども 100% はできない。明らかにしろと要求これまで何回もしてきましたけれども明らかにしていないし、する気はないというか私たちの意見は取り入れてないという感じですね。
Hideyuki Ban explains that the radioactivity in tritium can harm organisms' DNA, with long-term concentration increasing the severity of the damage.
放出されるのはトリチウムだけじゃないわけです。他の放射性物質も量は少ないかもしれないけど出ていくわけですよね。その評価が全然行われないわけ。 です。例えばストロンチウムも出ていきます。でそういったもののその評価というのが全くされてなくって、なんかトリチウムだけが問題であるようにあえてこうミスリードするようなやり方をしている。トリチウムの生体濃縮については、あるいは生物濃縮についてはいくつかの論文があると。
Basically, if you look at tank by tank, I did this a couple of years ago looking at their data, not mine, but I believe the results, but what they tell me is that each tank is quite different. So one might be very high in tritium but low in cesium, or low in cesium and high in strontium-90. And so there's a lot of variability. And why that concerns me is if you haven't analyzed all of the tanks, and what you show me are levels that can be 1,000, 100,000 times different between tanks, how do you know what you have that's going in the ocean to plan for? Like how much do you have to dilute this? How long will it take?
Ken Busela is an oceanographer at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in the United States. Over the past decade, he and several colleagues have paid regular visits to Fukushima to investigate the contamination of the seawater around the Daiichi nuclear power plant. Woods Hole, based on the US Atlantic coast, is the world's largest private, non-profit marine engineering education and research institution. Busela's focus is on the radioactive substances other than tritium contained in the wastewater.
They analyze tens of thousands of seafood samples a year, say, for their monitoring program. This is only 1,000 tanks. There are something like 50 main forms of radioactivity, isotopes of concern. Often they're just looking at 7 or 8. They're not doing the full suite.
But it remains to be seen how the contaminated wastewater will spread after being released into the sea, and to what extent it will impact the surrounding countries and even the entire Pacific region. The Geomar Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research, based in Kiel, Germany, is the world's leading institution in marine research. It conducted a simulation experiment on the discharge of radioactive substances. The results showed that the powerful currents along the coast of Fukushima could spread radioactive materials to most of the Pacific Ocean within 57 days from the date of discharge. The US and Canada would be affected in 3 years, and most of the world's oceans within a decade. Oceanographers are also concerned about radionuclides accumulating in the cells of some organisms. In 2021, Professor Wang Yu at the College of Marine Life Sciences of Ocean University of China and her team carried out a simulation experiment to see how cesium, a typical nuclide, would impact marine life. Their aim was to verify if the Japanese government was being honest in stating that the diluted wastewater released into the sea would not impact the marine environment and the organisms in it. The Yellow Sea off China's east coast is home to a huge variety of plankton, nekton and benthos. The marine aquaculture is highly developed, and scallops, oysters, sea cucumbers and other seafoods are cultivated here. Professor Wong chose as the subject of her experiments Mytilus edulis, or blue mussels, a sentinel species that can predict environmental changes.
这个色呢，进入到贝类体内以后呢，它会在不同的器官当中富集，比方说血细胞，比方说性腺，比方说消化腺等等。而且随着环境就是环境里面色的这个浓度的升高，它这个富集程度是越来越高。所以这个呢，我们这项研究表明，就是低浓度的、短时间的这种核物质、典型核素对生物的确是有影响的。
So what happens if humans are exposed to the contaminated marine organisms or the contaminated marine environment?
我们是这样说的，就是大鱼吃小鱼，小鱼吃虾米，这是一个食物链的关系。那么海洋生物通过这种吃与被吃的这种关系呢，会结成一个复杂的食物链和食物网。那么其实在这条链或者网的顶端就是人类。所以我们在这个吃或者被吃的过程当中，那么这个核素呢，可以通过食物链的层层传递， 最终影响到人类。
Japan, as the only country ever subjected to a nuclear attack, is deeply conscious of the dangers of radiation. Yet its government chose unilaterally to release contaminated nuclear wastewater into the sea without the consent of its neighbours. Effectively, this exposed other countries and regions, among them China, Russia, the Republic of Korea and the Philippines, as well as the Pacific Island nations, to the risk of nuclear contamination.
日本政府已经决定将福岛核污染水排入大海。这可不是日本一家的私事，而是事关海洋环境和人类健康的大事儿。我们敦促日方以负责任的态度处理好这一问题。
The Pacific Islands Forum also holds that the discharge of contaminated wastewater into the sea is not a domestic matter. It has urged Japan to be guided by science and existing data in its actions. In the mid-20th century, the US chose the remote Marshall Islands as a site for its nuclear tests. As a result, the islanders suffered serious health issues and the local ecological environment suffered irreversible damage, leaving vast areas uninhabitable for several decades. In the Republic of Korea, many environmental and citizen groups have also rallied to protest against Japan's decision to release contaminated wastewater from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant into the sea.
안 좋은 소식들이 많이 들려오고 있는 것 같아요. 후쿠시마 오염수를 방류하겠다라든지, 근데 사실 어떻게 보면 바다는 공동의 재산인 거고 또 식탁을 위협하는 문제라서.
At dawn, the Bulungan seafood market in Manila comes to life. Fishermen from Manila, Cavite, Batangas and other parts of the Philippines are arriving with the day's catch. Gilbert Reyes has just sold several kilograms of flatfish he caught in Manila Bay, but he complains that pollution in the fishing grounds has severely reduced the size of his catch compared to 20 years ago. Now, fishermen like Gilbert Reyes have another concern. The discharge of contaminated wastewater from Fukushima into the sea. Although Japan is thousands of kilometers away, the Philippines fishermen are conscious that they share the same ocean and the same ecosystem.
Kung malaman po lang na mayroon palang itatapon sa Pacific Ocean, yung pagsabog mula sa nuclear plant na mayroong radioactive water, baka yung aming mga ating likas na yaman dito sa Manila Bay, takot na po kainin ng mga sambayan ng Pilipino at mga consumer. Kasi hindi po ito maganda sa epekto ng kalikasan at sa kalusugan ng mga isda, mga yamang dagat at sa kalusugan ng mga tao.
The Nuclear-Free Bataan movement is a non-governmental organization in the Philippines. It claims that if Japan goes ahead with dumping the contaminated wastewater into the sea, the marine environment will be severely damaged, resulting in a huge risk to human health. Therefore, Japan would be wrong to arbitrarily dump treated radioactive water into the sea.
First, we do not believe that it is treated. The term treated is from TEPCO, so they are also the operator of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. And in fact, we condemn the TEPCO for failing to listen to the communities in Fukushima and for its shortcoming in addressing the problem in Fukushima.
The organization appealed to Japan to look for other methods of handling the contaminated wastewater instead of the simplest option, which threatens to destroy the oceans. At a United Nations Security Council session on February 14, 2023, Russia's Deputy Permanent Representative, Dmitry Chumakov, expressed his country's concern over Japan's plans to dump contaminated wastewater from Fukushima into the sea.
Рассчитываем, что Токио проявит должную степень транспарентности и будет информировать о своих действиях, которые могут представлять реальную радиационную угрозу, и в случае необходимости позволит провести мониторинг.
The Kamchatka Peninsula, Sakhalin and Khabarovsk in Russia's Far East all border the Pacific Ocean. They are important fishing grounds and popular tourist destinations.
Все время идут разговоры о том, что нужна большая открытость, но тем не менее не так много, есть часть научных работ, но тем не менее не так много, вот официальных данных не так много. В частности, оценка экологического воздействия приводится только для сухопутной части Японии, потому что это действительно важно для жизни людей, и поэтому она была сделана достаточно тщательно, но тем не менее по морской части нет никакой оценки и непонятно, какое воздействие уже было оказано на бентос.
If we accept that, then each and every polluter in the world can do the same. They can dump toxic chemicals, saying, wow, it will be diluted. They can come back to this old and crime practice of dumping liquid nuclear waste, saying, well, the ocean is so big, it will be diluted. So I don't like this idea.
So deep and widespread are the concerns about the discharge of contaminated wastewater from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that the International Atomic Energy Agency has intervened. It has sent 3 teams to Japan to investigate the situation. However, it is yet to reach a conclusion about the safety of Japan's disposal plans.
The people from the neighboring countries and the public in general it has to be fully confident that the agency is working to this independent activity to have a neutral and independent position, and all conclusions that we are going to summarize will be public, with public domain, will be based on the international safety standards.
All the stakeholders are unanimous in opposing Japan's decision. But is dumping it into the sea the only viable method of dealing with the contaminated wastewater? Experts suggest that the Japanese government has 4 other disposal options, namely releasing the wastewater into the atmosphere through evaporation, injecting it deep underground through a pipeline, disposing of it via electrolysis, and solidifying it and burying it underground. Of the 5 methods, releasing it into the sea is the cheapest.
日本呢，因为这个行为是最不负责任的，它是采用了最廉价的一种方法。那么实际上，除了这种方法以外呢，还可以有高温蒸汽的方法。这是切尔诺贝利核电站，那么它采用的是这种方法。还有一种呢是电离电解的这种方法。再就是呢，将核废水、核物质固化以后埋葬，这种方法呢都是可行的。其中固化的这种方法呢，应该是危险性比较小的一个方法，但是呢，它的成本是最高的。所以呢，方法有，但是呢，成本不一样。
Japan has taken the unilateral decision to discharge the wastewater into the sea. It costs the least financially, but the cost in terms of damage to the environment, human health and safety is being borne by the whole world. Through its action, Japan is ignoring its obligations under international law and as a contracting party to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Article 192 of the Convention stipulates that states have an obligation to protect and preserve the marine environment. And Item 1 of Article 194 stipulates that states shall take all measures that are necessary to prevent, reduce and control pollution of the marine environment using the best practical means at their disposal and in accordance with their capabilities.
日本动辄也是谈规则的，动辄呢跟着美国的步伐谈所谓以规则为基础的秩序。但是很明确的是，不管是在排污的问题上，还是呢在安全、军事、战略等问题上，当他们这些国家谈规则的时候，所谓的规则只是他们的小团体的家法帮规，而并不是国际规则。所以呢，在排污的问题上是再一次展现出的对国际规则的绑架所带来的恶果。
And so Japan continues its preparations to discharge contaminated wastewater into the sea. The equipment needed for the operation was activated on March the 17th. In Fukushima, people feel trapped, with no sign of a way out of the desperate situation they find themselves in.
まだ春でないです。冬です。福島県の海はまだ冬です。まだ何にも決まってないでしょ。人間一回ダメとなれば買わないんじゃないの？福島県の魚は。こういうこと流せばね。
As the date for releasing the contaminated wastewater approaches, the Japanese government continues to face condemnation at home and abroad. But still it is showing no sign that it is prepared to act responsibly and transparently or to seek a better solution to the issue, despite the potential devastation its action threatens to inflict on the common home of all humanity.